7, 8. There he is, Scott. Okay.
All right,
Greg
you're
is
live,
on.
Mayor. You're good to go.
Okay, looks like we have everyone ready to begin. Thank you, Carrie.
Thanks, Kara.
You're welcome.
The August 18th, 2020 meeting of the City of Oneonta Common Council is hereby called to order. I will call the roll. Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Risberger.
Here.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Here.
Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember Rafter.
Here.
Councilmember Drenick.
Here.
Okay, everybody's here tonight. Glad to have you here. Welcome. Okay, I just want to share a few important things with you. For a couple of reasons yesterday was some days of reflection for me. It is actually 5 months to the day that we began to shut the city down, shutting down all our business, all of our not-for-profits, shutting down the colleges, shutting down the schools, shutting down all of our city operations, doing something that none of us ever dreamed we would have to do. Also today, I was preparing myself to speak at a mayor's forum for the Mohawk Valley. 5 mayors held a forum today, and so I was looking to prepare my remarks for that. And all of it, I came away from all of it, I have to tell you, just feeling incredibly proud of all we have done over the past 5 months in every sector of the city, everybody together. First of all, our staff. I can't say enough for our department heads and our staff. They were asked to reinvent everything that they do in ways they never thought they would have to, without any forethought. And it was all done without missing a beat, without missing services to the public, with a positive attitude. It was just remarkable. And while I'm hesitant to bring up individual names because everybody contributed, I do have to bring up Katie and Greg because they have just stepped up and filled a leadership role that was not asked of them, but they saw that it needed to be done and they did it. They've been working 7 days a week. I don't know how many hours a day. I'm sure they're tired, even though they won't say it. And we just all owe them, not just us, the entire city owes them a real debt of gratitude. Our Survive Then Thrive efforts. Our finance committee, Len Carson represents the finance committee on the council here. They're moving forward this week with making awards to our City of Oneonta small businesses. I believe the award letters are just about ready to go out. The selection committee has completed their work, I believe, and we'll be announcing awards this week. So Len, and to your committee, thank you very much for all the work you did on that. Greatly appreciated. The Saturdays on Main Street, Mark Drenick has been nothing less than a hero on this. I mean, the amount of time that he has put into it, the passion, the energy. He's driven everybody crazy in the course of it, but it's been worth it. It's really, if you go down to Main Street, you see people eating out at night, everybody's got a smile on their face. Everybody says how wonderful it is. The restaurant owners, the business owners, all say it's been had a positive impact on them. It's been a real bright spot in what's otherwise been a pretty dreary summer from the perspective of business. Our planning and marketing groups are moving forward. We've just had a great sense of community throughout the city. Our efforts have been non-political. The chamber, the Otsego Chamber, has been absolutely a wonderful partner. So is Destination Oneonta, our not-for-profits. The business community has been just, all they've gone through, and I've never hear complaints. All I hear is let's work together, showing appreciation for whatever everybody's doing to help out with a real can-do mode. And the Oneonta YMCA this summer, they have stepped up, provided pool, swimming lessons, camp for kids. They didn't have to do that. It was difficult. We told them if they're up to it. They said, yes, we're absolutely up for it. And they've done just an absolutely great job with that. And it's made a difference for so many people. Here in the city, our staff are intact. Our projects are moving forward. So we have just a lot to feel proud of all throughout the city. But with fall comes many unknowns and risks and challenges. We don't know what's happening with the schools opening, creating stress for both children and parents. What happens when we start to move indoors as the weather gets colder? And of course, the big one is 7,000 students arriving in the city all at the same time from many different places all across the country. Real challenges, and we know that reopening the colleges does require a well thought out strategy. We want to make sure we do it safely. The colleges have both created excellent safety plans. If you read through them, it's remarkable what the students have to sacrifice on campus. No dining halls, no visitation on the dorms, no group activities, no sports, no classes for the most part. So everything designed to keep them safe. But when they're off campus, that responsibility falls to us. And we need to show the same intent that the colleges are on keeping folks safe when they're off campus. We have set up groups to meet on a regular basis of students, faculty, staff, and city officials and community members to monitor how we're doing. And we will continue to do that through the semester. We're taking all reasonable precautions. And as they say, we're hoping for the best, but we have to prepare for the worst. And I think we're doing a good job. I want to give you a few important updates on the return of the colleges. I think most of you have seen my communication to the incoming students calling for shared sacrifice. Everybody in this community has been sacrificing for the last 5 months, whether it's not going out for drinks with friends, not eating in restaurants, not partying. We're just asking for same sense of community, shared sacrifice from them. The police department is, under Chief Brenner, is gearing up with a strategy of strict enforcement against house parties, which can be one of the biggest risks in transmission of the disease. And staying consistent with the intent of the college safety plans, the thought of crowded buses going downtown, the thought of bringing more people downtown than the bars can handle under their very limited capacity requirements placed in them by the governor, just is so inconsistent with everything else that's being asked of the students that it would make no sense at all. Now, we contract with 3 different entities for our bus service. We have notified all 3 that our intent is in the evening hours to work with the student associations to provide transportation for essentials, whether it's getting to night classes, getting to the library, going shopping. But we don't want to facilitate and encourage nightlife. Harper College and Hillside Commons have both thanked us for this. They both said that they appreciate that is consistent with their intent upon their campus or in their facility, and are appreciative that we're doing this. It's been a little different with SUNY, the SUNY Student Association, under the guidance of their staff faculty member, has moved to hire their own bus company to provide transportation from the campus to our downtown at night. Now, I will tell you this is a disappointment. It's I would certainly hope that the college advisor would be advising them as to the importance of shared sacrifice. And this is a time for seriousness, but that's not the case. We can't control everything. We will do what we can. We will not facilitate what we think is the wrong thing to do. We will monitor how this goes. And I will be the first one to say that I hope it goes well. I hope there are no problems. I hope nobody gets sick. And if that's the case, I will happily get up and say that we were wrong. and we're pleased that it went well. But we will monitor it closely, and I am disappointed with that decision that was made by SUNY. Finally, testing. I want to applaud Hartwick College. They have decided that they are requiring a negative test of every returning student or returning or new incoming student. No student will come back to campus without showing a recent negative test, which they will be required to get on their own before they come back to Oneonta. They will also have a protocol of ongoing testing of all students. The SUNY, I'm not sure where they are at right now. I will tell you that the SUNY system statewide has developed, in partnership with the Upstate Medical Center, a testing program that is available to all SUNY campuses. It's pool testing, saliva pool testing. The campuses can pool anywhere between 10 and 25 students' saliva to be tested in one test. If it comes back negative, it's assumed that everybody in the pool is negative. If it comes back positive, then everybody in that pool gets tested. It's a way of doing the testing at 1/10 of the price of what it would cost if you were testing each person individually. It's an opt-in. It's not mandated for the SUNY campuses, but it's available to all SUNY campuses. I called President Morris at the end of last week to ask if they were going to opt in. I was told that they're still investigating it. I certainly hope and encourage them to opt in on this. It's an opportunity to be able to perform tests on all students in a very affordable way, and I'm hoping that SUNY Oneonta does choose to participate. I won't go on any further, but if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to try my best to answer them. Len?
Thank you, Mayor. With regards to the SUNY Oneonta bus contract, is that just temporary? I guess maybe I missed that part. If you said it, I apologize. Is that just for 2020, or is that something that they're going to continue on?
Well, I would think not. We don't know for sure. We will. We are currently negotiating a contract with the Student Association. No, it is our intent that the contract will make it clear that we have a contract for 2 years for continuing service under the same criteria, hours, requirements that we've had in the past, except under the circumstances of a public health threat, which we're dealing with right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Dave?
Do we know where these buses that they're hiring, where they're going to be dropping the students off? And do they need permission from the city to do so, or to establish a bus stop downtown?
You know, that is being handled by Chief Brenner. You know, he will be in communication with the SUNY folks to make sure that we don't know where it's going to be. And yes, they will need permission unless it's in a private property. But we don't know the answer to that yet, but they will have to work with Chief Brenner on determining a place that he deems appropriate and safe. Yes, Dave?
Just to follow up, just in case this goes sideways, and I really hope it doesn't, but looking at what's happened in other parts of the countries with bars that are open and the students flocking back to them, I know that various cities around the country, and definitely within New York State, have different guidelines for closing hours. If this goes poorly, do we have the ability to tell the bars they need to be closed at a different time?
I'll let David Merzig answer that.
Like all things liquor related, we do not have the local option to do that. It would have to be through the State Liquor Authority. However, the State Liquor Authority has in the past been helpful if we run into situations like that. Again, they have been, again, the chief can speak to enforcement, but the SLA has been very aggressive in enforcing specific liquor license abuses. So if there's a report of a particular location or a general citation, then we would have to go to the state liquor authority. We don't have any local authority to shut down. I mean, we do for like code enforcement violations or that sort of thing. But as far as liquor license or hours of operation, that's totally within the state purview.
So that's other cities that have different shutting down times for bars. They've basically done it through the SLA.
That's correct.
Okay.
Mark Janik?
Yeah, I want to go back to the buses. I have a couple of questions. Do we know that they are going to be required, this operator, to apply the same guidelines for social distancing that would put 50% of riders on a bus to start with? That's one question. The other is, do we know where these buses are going to wind up idling while they're waiting for their routes to be begun again? Typically, they're going to sit someplace for a little while.
We don't have answers to those questions yet. We only found out about this a couple of days ago. So we will be having communications with the folks on SUNY on all of these issues as we negotiate the contract, and all of these terms will be addressed. But no, we don't have many answers at all at this time. Chief Brenner, is there anything you want to add?
My biggest goal as far as the bus system and the bus stops is we just want to make sure where they're going to stop is going to be safe. I don't want them stopping in the middle of the road, and I don't want them to think they can. So this is going to have to be something we're going to tell them what they can't do and let them figure out what they think they can. They may have to open negotiations with some private property owners, something along those lines. But our main priority is going to be safety for the pedestrians and the other vehicles coming by. I really don't know what they're going to do. It'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
Anybody else?
This isn't anything that has to be licensed or permitted through the city, does it, Gary?
I don't believe so. If anybody knows otherwise, speak up. No, I don't believe so, Dave. Scott, is that your hand up, or are you adjusting your monitor?
Sorry, I'm adjusting my monitor, but I think Katie Lepari Shoes had her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Katie?
Yeah, no, I did just want to ask kind of general process question, because you had said, Mayor, you used the phrase "we." Just found out about this a couple of days ago, and I know that, at least speaking for myself, I am basically just finding out about this here along with the public. And so I guess my question is, what is my question? How does the council get involved with things like this a bit earlier, so that we can maybe have a better understanding, so that then we can answer questions if our constituents have them?
That's a good question, Katie. I don't have an answer for you. This is a fast-moving situation. The only reason that I found out about it was that I placed a personal phone call to the student president of the Student Association on Sunday night to get an update on where things are at. And he informally notified me Sunday night on that phone call. So, so you're hearing about it, very soon after, I met with Chief Brenner and David O'Tailing and David Merzig yesterday to go over it the day after we heard. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but this is just happening very quickly and informally at that. We have not received official notice of it. John?
Yes. As the buses go from campus to downtown, are they, I'll use the word allowed, to drop off and pick up people en route?
No, they are not. These are by definition charter buses. They cannot pick up people along the route. They cannot use our bus stops.
Okay.
David Hoteling, anything you want to add?
No, I think you pretty much hit on it.
If there's no further, I'm sorry, Len.
Gary, I don't know if you want to do it here or maybe later. It's up to you. But since we're talking about the students, I did just want to talk about the letter that was published from you with regards to the students. And within that, and with Chief Brenner here, I'd like to hear from both of you on your expectations, or what is the parameters on someone looking, one of these students, I'm assuming that's who you're addressing it to, is the students, on a $1,000 fine. I know I've fielded several questions on this, and I was wondering if you could just take a moment and maybe address to the general public or constituents how someone would get themselves to the point where they're going to be charged and looking at a $1,000 fine.
I'll let Chief Brenner and David Merzick respond to that. Whoever wants to go first.
Chief, why don't you describe the charge and I'll describe the penalties.
All right. As with any of our complaints we have of large gatherings or large parties, we can always charge noise or social host if it fits. But what we're really looking at to take a harder stance is a criminal procedure law called criminal nuisance. And that's a situation that we have used in large party situations. It's creating a dangerous environment to a large number of people. And we use it in big parties now kind of as a last resort when they do things like disconnect the smoke detectors and block the entrances. But with the COVID pandemic now, it's a lot easier to prove that packing 100 people into a small house therefore ups the risk factor. That is a B misdemeanor. It is a fingerprintable offense with a possibility of a criminal record. So we really don't like to do that originally to begin with. But in these situations, I really feel as though if they're creating that much of a risk, maybe that's the route we have to go. I'll let Dave talk about fines.
Yeah, as the chief mentioned, there are three, just to give you more information than you want to have, there are three levels of criminal actions. One is a violation. A violation is not a crime, but it's getting a parking ticket, it's urinating on the sidewalk, it's petty violations. That is not a crime. Misdemeanors are in fact a crime. You're fingerprinted, you got a criminal record, and you're subject to fines up to $1,000 or a year in jail. That's up to the court after a person's found guilty. The third is felonies, of course, grand larceny, bank robbery, murder, that sort of thing. But this is in fact a crime because you're putting a significant number of people's health at risk. And if you do that, you can be subject to a criminal charge.
I just want two things on this. One, this is not directed only at students. This is something that we have to enforce across the board because adults having parties of 50 people in their house, in a small house with people on top of each other, drinking or not, is dangerous to all of us. So we've done pretty well so far. We should feel proud about that. We need to continue. Even adults want to let loose a little bit, but we just can't afford to right now. So this is not just targeted at students. This is something that we will enforce across the board because we have to. We face a situation where there's a great risk to public health, people getting sick, people dying. We can't fool around on this. So it's, and the other thing is, the hope is that enforcement is not the key. The message is that it's serious, but my expectation is that every member of the community, whether a student or the year-round members of the community, are going to step up in a sense of shared sacrifice, not only to protect themselves, but to protect all the members of the community in this extremely unusual, unprecedented, dangerous time.
So let me rephrase. I'll start with a question. So you're saying, Chief Brenner and Dave, that you're primarily looking at large gatherings. Where'd you go? Large gatherings and or house parties. Is the number 50? Chief?
No, it's going to be based. Well, it's going to be 50 for the max, but it can be less than that if it's a small house with a bunch of people who can't socially distance at all. I think that if you have a house, the size of, I don't know, the size of my office, which isn't very big, with 20 people in it, that's too many. And that's going to be at the discretion of the officers, but they're going to be told not a lot of discretion. If they can't be 6 feet apart, it's too many.
Okay,
that's
so
the
that's
state law.
that's the qualifier here, is that if the individuals within the house, whatever the age of the adults are, since we're not directing this to the college kids now, even though that letter really is specific to that, because I fielded quite a few questions on this one. So Chief, I just want everyone to be clear about this, is that your officers are going to come to my house, for example, and I'm having somebody sees a bunch of cars in Len Carson's driveway and around the block, and your officers are sent to 16 Kearney Street. Your officers arrive on scene, and if we're not 6 feet apart, we have a problem.
It's not 6 feet apart of people who aren't in the same residence. I mean, there's discretion with everything on it. It's going to matter on the totality of the circumstances.
I guess that's my point, Chief, is that I fielded a lot of questions on this and people are asking me. And so I'm trying to give you the opportunity to explain to the general public via this Zoom meeting of what are the officers looking for. So our young adults that are coming back into the community and the existing citizens, what is it that we're going to be trying to avoid here? Because this is substantial, looking at a criminal charge of public health nuisance.
Correct.
Can I tell you what the state law is? That you cannot have a gathering in which people do not have the space to be separated by 6 feet from every other person. And no matter how big the space is, no matter whether it's indoor or outdoor, you cannot have a gathering of more than 50 people. That is the state law. The governor has tasked the local municipalities to enforce it.
Right.
And I hear every day from the governor's office that it is your job to enforce this in order to keep us safe.
So if you don't mind, it's just that I'm also taking calls from business owners, and they may or may not own drinking establishments in downtown Oneonta or around the city of Oneonta. What is it that you can tell these business owners, Chief Brenner, what your officers are going to be looking for? Because I know that they're very concerned. They're trying to comply, but they don't know what you're going to be looking for.
Most of the business owners, especially if you're talking about food or drinking, they've already have an established percentage of occupancy that they're allowed. I believe it's 50%. So we can see what their occupancy is and if they're complying with that. And then there's the other things too about, sitting down if they're eating and all that. We can look at as well. I've talked to at least one bar owner who said that he's actually going to voluntarily cut his capacity to about 30%, 35%, whatever was a round number that worked for him there, just to be on the safe side. Part of the problems, and we do understand that some of the businesses are going to have problems with kids probably pushing their way in, and we're going to expect them to at least attempt to control that, but we don't want them starting big fights. That's when they call us, and then we'll we'll assess the situation and respond.
Mark Dranik?
So just a clarification, the liability that the bar owners and restaurants, most specifically bar owners, might have if they have the limited occupancy that they do have and they are complying with that, there are likely to be 40 or 50 or more kids on the sidewalk in front of their premises. Are they in any way, shape, or form liable for the congregation of the folks on the sidewalk?
I spoke to one of the bar owners about this. This was one of his largest concerns. And they assured me they would do what they can, but again, a little bit of common sense will work here. If it's directly in front of their establishment, I'd like to see them try. But if the line extends halfway down the block, I don't expect them to try and maintain that. It's a little bit of a catch-22 for them, because they don't want to have their bar people out in the street because that's not their job.
Right.
But yet they also don't want to be held responsible for creating a situation outside. So what we're going to ask them to do is to do the best they can. If they really having a problem, let us know. And then we'll take care.
Okay.
There's nothing good about any of this, and there are no good answers or solutions. Everything is a matter of choosing what is the least bad solution. And the other thing is there's a lot of unknowns, and we have to be flexible as we go forward. All of our best laid out plans may not work. And so flexibility is key. We need to monitor how we're doing and be prepared to change because we've never done this before. And one of the reasons for not wanting to facilitate large crowds coming downtown on crowded buses is because the bar's capacity is so low. Everybody has to be seated at a table, or if they're seated at the bar, they have to be 6 feet apart. The number of people that they can actually serve is very, very small. And we don't want to put the burden on them of having large crowds outside that they have to feel responsible for. So there's nothing good here, but we are being as proactive as we can. I think we have good plans. I think we have reason to believe we're going to be successful. I think we have reason to believe we're going to keep everybody safe. And we're going to monitor this closely. We're also going to have our control room groups meeting with the colleges, where we're going to talk every week about how things are going and work together with the students about making adjustments. Or if things are going really well, talk about how we can ease up. So we're all in this together. Okay, thank you all. If there's nothing further, let's go to the board and commission reports. Environmental Board, Councilmember Davies, do you have a report for us?
I do, Mayor. Thank you. The Environmental Board meeting met last Tuesday, and they had one big issue that they were discussing they've been working on. A petitioner prior to COVID, when they were meeting, brought forward the idea of creating a beekeeping ordinance. And during that time, or during the last couple of months when we haven't met, they've been looking at that and looking for some examples of that, models of those types of ordinances from around the country. And at this meeting, they discussed several very interesting ones and are going to be proposing to the legislative committee at some point soon a framework for an ordinance that would allow for beekeeping. They have certainly taken into account many different things: setbacks, number of hives, beekeeper training, and permitting process. So they're trying to do the due diligence to create a framework for an ordinance that might allow for that to happen. The other issue that they discussed was the easement between the sidewalk and the road. And there was some concern about some trees and plantings, but that has been addressed within the city. So that was quickly resolved, and we closed the meeting shortly after that.
Questions, anyone? Bear with me here. I don't know what happened to my computer. Anybody have any questions? Okay, thank you, Mark. Let's go to the Board of Public Service. Did they meet this week, Board of
Yes,
Public
and-
Service?
Yes, they did. Board of
Okay.
Public Service met on the 13th, and it was a very, very, very busy agenda. I'll run through some of the highlights. 69 Water Street, water and sewer bill. A lot of these have been held off for several months. Denied. 20 Fair Street, same story. Denied, but then they were in fact put back on the agenda for next month. That came of a lot of conversation that there was a lot of back and forth around that. I'll touch on that at the end of the report here. 68 to 70 Maple Street water and sewer bill appeal was denied. They were complaining about the cost, and the chair was going to write a letter to them explaining how that works here. 318 to 324 Main Street, snow removal. We're talking about stuff that happened in February still. The fine had been reduced as it wasn't their sidewalk. This is the Masonic Lodge. They said that they weren't done appealing, and they weren't. Ultimately, the fees were vacated as we didn't have enough or conclusive enough photos of what had transpired there with their sidewalk. So, and they've been good citizens throughout. So, all their fines were vacated. 396 Chestnut Street water and sewer bill appeal. Again, inconsistent amounts has been the story, and what they're doing is they're pulling the water meter there, and we'll move that to next month's agenda. 152 to 154 Main Street water and sewer bill appeal, that was denied. 5 West Ann Street, same story. Water and sewer bill appeal, but again, the inconsistencies of some of the readings, at least in terms of what the expectations of the owners are. So that's been moved to next month's agenda. 10 East End Avenue was deemed an unsafe property, ordered vacated and repaired. 29 Church Street, an unsafe garage, which was, the owner was saying, look, it's an unsafe garage. So they're approved to demo that in 60 days. 50 to 52 East Street was added to the agenda as there's an abandoned vehicle, no smoke detectors, I can't get in. So we don't have any photographs. However, Steve Yearley's got a lot of correspondence. So we'll look at that next month. But in the meantime, we'll post a fire code unsafe on that building. The issue that came up several times that I've kind of referenced here was the high water usage. And the fact that it came as a surprise to a number of the folks who were asking these appeals. I asked for the details of the city's policy and the process for sending notifications, as some people don't seem to ever recall seeing notifications. I'm frankly confused by it myself. So Greg is going to provide that, and we'll look at that and see what we might be able to do to ensure that people are getting the word, because honestly, if they're getting the word, many of them may very well stop whatever water leak that they may have. In one particular case, we're talking about 1,000 gallons a day out of out of a house that didn't appear to have any leaks or running water for the toilet. So all of those drops of water that we can save are a good thing, and so we'll look to see what the process is right now about alerting people to the fact of their high water usage. So a lot on the agenda, and I suspect a lot for next month. So that's it.
Questions? Okay, thank you, Mark. Let's go to committee reports. Legislative committee.
I'm sorry, Gary, I just tried to unmute. Mark, did you say that was 396 Chestnut Street? They're
yeah,
appealing the water
396
and sewer bill?
Chestnut Street. Yes, they are pulling the water meter, and we'll see what the story is there. And again, depending on what the story is, we'll take that up at next month's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Gary.
That's okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's go to legislative committee. That'd be Councilmember Rafter.
Yes, we met last week and only 2 items were on the agenda. The first was regarding a film permit and the ability to close section of Main Street and a section of Central Avenue from Spruce to the top of the hill. And that was discussed, and I believe it's going to be discussed a little bit further tonight. Then we also discussed briefly, I believe it was coming from Len Carson, and that was a proposal or a thought to place term limits on our various commissions and boards. And no conclusion was reached. We don't have anything in writing regarding that. So more to be discussed, I imagine.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, John, I believe it was to remove, the discussion was whether to remove term limits.
Yes, it was. Just looking at my notes, but it had to do with, well, I'm not sure. Yeah, but that, we'll leave it at that. The term limit, nothing specifically has been proposed that is, could be formatted as a piece of legislation or change in the code.
Questions for John Rafter? Okay. Finance Human Resource Committee, Councilmember Carson.
Thank you, Mayor. We met August 10th. Thank you, Jenny, our finance director, for getting the minutes out and sent to the council members. And from the conclusion of our meeting, you have before you motions 3 through 14, I believe it is. And I will entertain any questions.
Okay, sounds like there are none. Thank you very much. All right, let's go to the consent agenda. Just for clarification, I know there was some discussion earlier today. Councilmember Carson, did you want those human resource staff appointments removed from the consent agenda, or did you want to leave them on?
Unless there's another committee member that wants them removed, I personally am not going to ask for them to be removed.
Okay, then I'll just treat it as it's written. We'll go from there. Okay. Motion 1, motion that the council approves the minutes of the regular meeting, which was held on August 4th, 2020, and the budget discussion, which was held on August 5th, 2020. 2, motion that the council approves the warrants, which total $560,997.94, and the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. Number 3, motion that in order to comply with the New York State DOT reporting and related compliance related to both New York State DOT and federal aid grants, the Common Council authorizes the creation of an Internet Electronic Data Transfer Account on behalf of and in the name of the City of Oneonta, with Internet Government Solutions, Equitable Business Opportunities, and authorizes Virginia Lee, Director of Finance, Joseph Temming, Deputy Director of Finance, Carrie Ann Harrington, Deputy City Clerk, and a representative from McFarland Johnson, the city's airport consulting firm, as authorized users of the account in compliance with the terms and conditions set forth in the system user agreement and subject to the review of the city attorney. 4, motion that the council declares the items per the attached list as surplus and authorizes the purchasing agent to dispose of the same. Items determined to have value will be listed for sale on the auction website, publicsurplus.com. 5, Motion that the council approves the budget transfers, which total $62,625 as presented in the reports which you received. 6, motion that the council establishes the 2020 street projects, capital projects, which will be funded using a combination of funds provided in the 2020 adopted budget, plus state funding, and plus the remaining balance within the 2019 street capital project, and to authorize the estimated project budgets and necessary budget amendments and transfers as follows. Moving from the general fund, $95,000, and from the capital project balance, $167,312, for a total of $262,312, moving to the street projects 2020 line H64.5110.2. And $341,313 in New York State aid, which consists of CHIPS, Pave New York, EWR, is that emergency winter? I'm not, Greg, you may have to help me out there with what EWR stands for.
Extreme winter recovery.
Okay, thank you. And that $341,313 would be moved to the street projects 2020 line H16.5110.207. 7, motion that pursuant to the provisions of the general municipal law of the state of New York, the Common Council approves an expenditure of $145,000 from the General Fund Parks and Recreation Reserve. This will be used for the resurfacing of the Wilbur Park tennis courts and the Neoa Park pickleball courts, and also for the purchase and installation of fencing, net posts, and basketball hoops. Said funding includes a reassignment of $15,000 from the 2020 Parks and Recreation Reserve appropriations, which will increase the total budget for said project from the former proposed amount of $130,000 to $145,000. The resurfacing contract will be fulfilled under state contract pursuant to the approved cooperative procurement program. 8, motion that the council authorizes the mayor to enter into a renewal contract with the New York State Unified Court System. This will cover the period of April 1, 2020 through March 31st, 2021. It is subject to review by the city attorney. This is for the city's provision of cleaning, minor repair, and preventative maintenance services for the portions of the city's public safety building and the Asa C. Allison municipal building that are used by the court, with the city to receive an estimate of $37,388 under this 2020-2021 contract. 9, motion that the council authorizes the mayor, subject to review by the city attorney, to enter into an agreement with Hartwick College of Oneonta, New York, for the 2021 academic year for the continued provision of Oneonta public transit bus services with an annual charge of $30,000. 10, motion that the council authorizes the mayor, subject to the review of the city attorney, to enter into an agreement with Hillside Commons of Oneonta, LLC, for the period of August 1, 2020 through July 31, 2021. This also is for the continued provision of Oneonta public transit bus services with a maximum annual charge of $97,587. 11, motion that the Common Council appoints Carolina Stipelkowski to the position of civilian dispatcher in the Oneonta Police Department, effective August 19, 2020, at a base salary of $30,992, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. 12, Motion that the council appoints Jordan Cologne to the position of maintenance worker in the Department of Public Works. This would be effective on a date to be determined after August 19th, 2020. It would be at a base salary of $29,773, subject to satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. 13, motion that the council appoints Dylan Gask to the position of maintenance worker in the Department of Public Works. This would be effective August 19th, 2020 at a base salary of $29,773. Again, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. And 14, motion that the council appoints Nancy Allison to the position of part-time clerk in the Finance and Personnel Department, effective on a date to be determined after August 19th, 2020, at an hourly rate of $15, subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. 15, motion that the council adopts the ordinance to amend Chapter 300 of the City of Oneonta, of the Code of the City of Oneonta, entitled Zoning, which was laid electronically on the desks of the Common Council on August 11th, 2020, and would amend certain provisions of the Code of the City of Oneonta for the regulation of short-term rentals. 16, motion that the council concurs with the mayor's recommendation and approves the following appointment to a city board. That is the appointment of Nancy Aronson to the Huntington Memorial Library Board of Trustees for a term that would expire January 14th, 2021. That concludes the consent agenda. Raise your hand if you have a request to remove any of those items, please. Councilmember Carson?
Number 15.
15. Councilmember Rafter, did I see your hand up? No. Okay. Do I have them all? Okay, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda less item 15. Councilmember Carson moves it. Councilmember Drenick seconds. I will call the vote. Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter. I heard a yes. Councilmember Drenick.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. The consent agenda minus item 15 passes unanimously. Now I'll just scroll back to number 15. This was the adoption of the ordinance to amend the zoning code regarding the regulations impacting short-term rental. I'll entertain a motion to approve. Councilmember Lepari Shu, do I have a second? Councilmember Carson. Discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I pulled this just to give an opportunity for Councilmember Rafter, chair of this committee, to maybe expound upon this legislation. I know that this is something that the previous council had worked on, and I'd love to hear from the committee as a whole. I did spend some time and watch their Zoom meeting and thank them for that. I did send an email out and was corresponded by Code Enforcement Officer Stephen Yearley, and I appreciate that. It looks as though the Planning Commission as a whole has not looked at this, and I just wanted to know from the legislative committee's aspect, how they thought about that, because those are the folks that actually gonna have to live this.
Len, would you repeat the last sentence or two about who's going to have to live with it?
The planning commission, John,
Okay,
those are the folks that are gonna have to live this. And so, I mean, obviously the code enforcement officer, he must be happy with this because he drafted it. So I just wanted to make sure that the folks that are gonna work under this legislation, that they, what their thoughts were on it.
well, David, do you want to speak to that first?
Which David?
The other one. I'm sorry.
I know
Dave
Stephen is,
Risberger. Dave Risberger.
Oh. Well, I honestly, the planning commission isn't going to be issuing permits for people. So I think the idea behind this was that it was going to decrease the number of requests coming to the ZBA, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to decrease. I don't know that that's going to be the case. We haven't gone through over the last few years to see, looking at the number of requests for short-term rentals, how many are in-house in the home that they live in, and how many are in a rental property nearby that they were trying to use as a short-term rental. I do know that this makes it a lot easier for the code office to keep track of the short-term rentals and enforce the rules. They were basically unenforceable the way they were written before. So I was not one that was really in favor of this in the past, and some of the things we put into the legislation that Stephen came up with for us, I'm feeling more confident with, because it really drives home the fact that if you cannot buy a second home in the city just to use as a short-term rental. This allows you to use your own home as a short-term rental for short periods during the year. And it also has very specific guidelines to show that that home is your primary residence. So that's what I have to offer. I don't know if, I thought Stephen Yearley was on here. Oh, he is. I don't know if he has anything else he wants to add to the legislative piece and how it makes it easier for the code office.
Right. No, I thank you, Dave, for coming forward and giving that, because that is the impression that I had when I got on council, is that you weren't really in favor of this. And then you guys worked hard and got this legislation through. And so I know that I have constituents in the Fifth Ward that have wanted to do this, but have been unable to do it. So I just wanted to thank the legislative committee for getting this completed. So thank you.
Stephen Yearley, anything you want to add?
Can I, so the planning commission was provided with this piece of legislation. They've had it since approximately June 20th, and they actually knew of it prior to that date. So we have not had any correspondences between myself and the council with the planning commission. So, I mean, I provided what Ed Overby sent to me as part of this legislative review. So yeah, I mean, I haven't had any other correspondences with the planning commission as far as input on the legislation. From my point of view, I think that the legislation is a compromise that is going to help the code office better enforce our existing regulations and also allow more flexibility to the people in the city to, I mean, I don't want to say take advantage of, but to be able to use their property in a way that is beneficial to them and beneficial to the city, but doesn't just say, free for all, where we can just do it wherever we want. So I think this is a good compromise. It took a long time to get here, but I think it's a step forward for both sides.
Just as a reminder that even if this is passed tonight, it will still require a public hearing. I can't sign it into law without a public hearing. So if there are any additional comments from the Planning Commission, they can certainly still be received over the next 2 weeks.
And can I just add one more thing? The Planning Commission has 45 days to provide comment, and if they do not, it's just considered that they didn't have any sort of response. I mean, according to our code, they have 45 days to respond.
And the planning commission meets tomorrow night, so I can bring this up again at the end of the meeting, see if they have any thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
I saw somebody's hand up. Was it Scott? Oh,
Yeah,
John?
it was.
Oh.
Scott was there.
Oh,
Yeah, I was just curious if maybe you want to see how the zoning board feels about it, because as well, maybe just reach out to them, because everything that we do, it'll go to the zoning board. If it does get passed into law, it'll go to the people that are gonna come and do certain things. I'll go to the zoning board. I was just curious if they're gonna have any input on it as well, or at least they should, I would think.
well, we certainly would welcome, their input as long with anybody's input. Our code requires that the Planning Commission be given an opportunity to provide input. But certainly we would welcome comments from the ZBA members along with the general public. Anybody else?
Yes, I do. There are a couple of details. One of these struck a few things about the short-term rental property that received a permit from 2011 summer rental season. I don't quite recall having a summer rental season and how that's defined, because in some of this, I'm not sure where, for example, a person who's going away for several weeks during the winter, even 4 weeks during the winter or even longer. That's a question of whether this now can extend the ability to have a short-term rental permit through a 12-month window. Now let Stephen talk to that, I guess.
So the 2011 summer rental season is referencing what we used to have. It's a grandfathered permit. The city used to give out summer baseball permits. So what that 2011 summer permit thing references is that pre-existing permitting process. It basically just grandfathers properties that already had those permits into the new code. That verbiage has been in our code since we adopted the first ordinance. You could always extend those permits. You can currently, we issue 6-month permits, but you can reapply and carry a rental permit year round.
Okay. And
that 2011 summer rental permit is what we used to call short-term rental permits.
so is that a relevant
It is
thing
because
to introduce at this stage of the game?
We have some properties in the city that have been grandfathered since 2011 that exist in zones that we do not allow.
Yes, they can be in zones 1 or 2, and they are they grandfathered in a legal sense?
Yeah. So since 2011, if they've maintained those permits, then yes, they're grandfathered in, which is why the ordinance refers to these properties that existed since 2011 can continue to reapply.
Okay, so they have a 1-year period for the to reapply.
Right. If they don't renew that permit, then
And
that,
that right is lost.
right.
And it's a question other members of the council, I'm trying to buy a bit of time, but have other members of the council read this and have a conceptual clarity about what it says? And have any of them talked to any of their constituents about this? Or are we going to be relying on the next Zoomed meeting for a wider discussion about this? Also, it kind of seems a bit relevant to me because we are kind of at the end. We didn't have a baseball rental season. And if there are questions about this, I think it's probably wise to get them answered now in terms of practical considerations. We're not under a pressure at this point to pass this. So if there are a need to have more discussions. Also, I noticed there aren't that many people showing up at zoning meetings, at Zoom meetings to discuss what had been a controversial issue. And I wonder if we will have some regrets or remorses about it as it becomes more apparent as to what's now possible in zones 1 and 2. I do support the extension of the 30-day window. Anything under 30 days is considered a short-term rental. If that makes it easier for control of this, I think that's terrific. So I'll go back to that question of, is this something that's urgent? Asking the council members if they feel it's an urgent need under the circumstances to push this ahead in its time of questionable access to meetings.
I saw Councilmember Davies had his hand up.
Yeah, I was going to respond to, John, your earlier question, not the second question you just asked about speaking with constituents. When this came out, I thought I would get quite a few calls from folks about this, but I only got one. And I had a long conversation with a resident who was in support of this and offered some thoughts about it. To summarize some of those, they felt that this was a great opportunity for some of the folks within the community, maybe younger folks that needed some economic gain, to be able to put their house on Airbnb or whatever it might be and have a short-term rental. They thought also, and this was an interesting thought that I began kind of thinking about this a little differently, was that by gaining that income from renting the house for the short-term rental, it would allow homeowners to put more money back into the house, because the fact that the Airbnb clientele is generally a clientele that wants a little bit fixed up property, a nicer property. And so this might be an opportunity for that. So it was some of that argument that began to sway me towards supporting this, as well as the fact that I like what was put in there about residents and this being their primary dwelling. I thought that was an important point. So this will not allow for second, third, fourth homeowners to be able to buy houses in the city. I think this is aimed at our residents here that are that might need to have a little extra cash. And then frankly, given the fact that COVID has really impacted this town and this city and a lot of folks in it, when we get past it, this might be an option for folks to be able to have a short-term rental for the summer or perhaps the winter months if you want to visit only in the winter. But it might allow some folks to be able to generate some revenue that would normally be available to them. And then lastly, for me, I've heard several stories about people kind of, I'm going to call it cheating the system. And Stephen kind of referred to that, where people are figuring out ways around this to be able to put short-term rentals, and we really are powerless to be able to stop them. I think that this might begin to cut some of that out. So I will certainly say that I moved when I was kind of sitting in the crowd at last year's Common Council meetings where I was against this to now being for this.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to address John's question of why now. And I think that for me, the thought is more, why not now? If we have a completed piece of legislation that we have confirmation from our code enforcement office would help them be more effective. If we are on agreement on it, I think it makes sense to put it through. There's obviously the public comment period, which, to your point, it's a weird time with COVID. But I'm gonna quote you from a couple meetings ago. You said, "What the council giveth, the council taketh away." So I think, just to Stephen's point, this is a really good first step. It's something that's had a lot of conversation around it, and if we can all be mostly satisfied with it and we can put it into effect now, we can live with it for a while and kind of learn where we need to go next if changes need to be made. I don't believe that it's forever. I don't think anything we do is forever. So.
Councilmember Murphy.
Hi, John. Just to answer your question back a couple of minutes ago, yes, I understand and support it for all the reasons that both Katie and Mark have stated. In terms of feedback, we haven't gotten too much in the first ward. We did have a ward meeting a couple of weeks ago where we had an opportunity to talk about everything and anything in the city and the ward, and it was not brought up one way or the other.
Okay. Is there any further discussion before I call a vote? Okay, let's Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Aye.
Councilmember Rafter.
Aye.
Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
Okay. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And as I said, we will still need to have a public hearing on that, and we'll talk more about the ability to do that virtually and how we will. Okay. I now have, let's go down to, we have 2 items for individual discussion. There are, I believe, motions prepared for this, but I believe the committees wanted to first just open it up to discussion before moving to the motions. Both are motions to approve. One is to approve the application for a movie, and the other is to approve a waiver to a residency requirement for a firefighter. So let's start with number 17. There was an application received for some street closures in order to film a movie called Asteroids. Carrie, are you on? I know that Katie had sent out information to the council on that. Katie, I think you had been the one in communication directly with the applicant. Do you want to just summarize or provide any additional information before we open the discussion?
I mean, all of the information that we sent a fair amount of paperwork, and I apologize for that. I mean, probably 20, 25 pages worth of information of correspondence between the applicants and the city, trying to drill down exactly what they're looking for and their expectations of the city. Has anybody not had a chance to review that, or? Okay. So essentially they're looking for 2 days worth of closures. They're looking for a closure on Main Street for a few short hours, at which point they will film a scene where people cross the street from one side to the other, enter an establishment on Main Street. A few hours later, they exit and come out, as they put it, quote, to find a world in chaos. We're asking for our emergency vehicles to run down Main Street, which will be closed at that point, in emergency mode. And then that is the expectation for Main Street. As far as Central Avenue is concerned, they're looking for a closure. They have spoken with a few, but not many, of the residents on that street. They are hoping to, again, show a world or an environment where people are securing their properties with the theory that they are leaving money on to protect their assets, protect their family. And that one will require no city involvement other than the street closures. It would simply be buy-in from the neighborhood, the residents.
Does anyone have questions? Let's start with questions. Does anybody have additional questions after reading through the materials? Councilmember Drenick?
So as I look at it, there were any number of dates that they had asked for, and the last correspondence that I saw was that they would be willing to push it out as far as the 22nd or the 23rd relative to the Main Street closure, the 22nd being a Saturday and the 23rd working much better for me anyway, and I expect for most of the businesses being a Sunday. Do we have a firm date request on this at this point?
As far as Central is concerned, my computer decided not to cooperate at the exact same time. I apologize. They're very flexible with us as far as what dates they want to close. Mm-hmm. They are willing to work with the city, understanding that the city is the one providing with the permit and the resources to close the streets. They also want to encourage the communication with the residents so that they're able to work in partnership with them. Their language to us was that they want to build a relationship with the city so they can continue to film here. Like you said, they're still looking at the 22nd, 23rd, but they are able, as they indicated, to move things around a bit. They've already filmed their interior scenes as far as the establishment on Main Street is concerned. And at one point for their initial application, they were looking for a day earlier in the weekday to avoid any, what they felt would be a significant impact on traffic and potential business.
Mm-hmm. So I'm certainly going to be an advocate always for any kind of business or potential of business coming through the city and into the city. But I would really advocate for the closure of Main Street to be something that we're looking at on Sunday as opposed to any of those other days.
And that is something, I mean, they're rather flexible with us. As I indicated, they were looking for a date a week ago, and we explained to them that the policy was new applications were required to go through council. And they immediately indicated that they would not be filming and that they would wait to hear back.
Any other questions? Councilmember Harrington?
Sorry, couldn't get it unmuted there. It probably was in the material and I probably just overlooked it, and I apologize if it's there. If they're going to use our equipment and our personnel, or do they have to give us, or are they going to reimburse us, or are we going to bill them in any way for the use of that equipment and our personnel? And probably the other question that I have is probably more on the legal side. For our attorney, is does he see any legalities with us closing down a street and then running our vehicles in emergency mode, and God forbid if something should happen? And maybe the chiefs, well, I see the Chief Pigeon's on as well. Maybe Chief Brenner would like to weigh in on those as well.
I'll take the insurance part of it. I know that each applicant, as far as any closure is concerned, is required to provide the city with either certificate insurance, naming us as an additional insured, covering us. Generally, we request up to $1 million for any damages that may be incurred. If they are not able to provide that certificate of insurance for whatever reason, they're not incorporated, they're not an LLC, they simply don't have coverage. They are required to provide us with an indemnification agreement, releasing us and absolving us of any liability. As far as the emergency vehicles and the closure and all that, I'll hand that off to David or Doug.
I was just under the impression they wanted us to drive down the street with the lights on. I was gonna provide that. I didn't think it was that big a deal. We weren't necessarily looking at charging or anything along those lines for such a small blurb. But it's something we can look into if we really feel it's necessary.
No, I just didn't know how long they were gonna utilize the guys. Like, if you had to have a guy tied up for 2 hours, that they were gonna do this, or like if we incurred overtime or something like that, maybe that would be something we may want to look into. But if it's a quick blurb, then
I can certainly look into it.
Thanks.
Chief Pigeon, I think you're there. Anything you want to add?
That was also my understanding. I had a 3-minute conversation with the applicant, and she had indicated to me at that time that she just wanted one of the vehicles to drive down the street once, maybe twice, if they didn't get the first shot correctly. So, and certainly as far as overtime goes, I know that there was discussion with unions and things like that, and brought up to that effect. And certainly one of the administrators could do that, myself or the assistant chief. Have both offered that we could do that. We're under the understanding that it was short term, would take less than an hour or so.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter.
Regarding Central Avenue, I did speak to most of the residents. Their main concern was to know what's going on and to be able to express, to support this, but know how they might be inconvenienced, how they deal with questions or emergencies that pop up with going in or out of their house. Also, there were implied in the request things that they expected or perhaps would like to have people involved. Perhaps even having people on their, having people participate in this. And so I guess I could break it into a few things that they were concerned about. And that is, who will they be speaking to if this is approved? Who will they speak to? Who's going to be a manager regarding people on the street being able to get in and out of their house? Also, just thinking more about it, the students will very likely be back, and people will be wanting to get onto and off of Linden. That would be one of the exit points. And how is that going to be arranged? So the manager of the process in terms of the neighbors and facilitating neighbor movement, et cetera, I don't know how that's going to be done. Unlike a block party where generally people in the neighborhood are agreeing to close their block and party down, this is something where there may be a need for more communication and collaboration with neighbors' needs, and perhaps even at an unusual time of their process, the filming process. So I don't know how they're planning on doing that and being actively involved with the neighbors.
Carrie, do you have any answers to John Rafter's questions?
I do. One of the main questions we had asked of them, because if you recall, a number of questions came out of the legislative committee meeting. We approached them with a number of questions, and 2 of them were specific to the access and the involvement of those that reside on Central Avenue. Their producer, Lori Bailey, has indicated that she's spoken with several of the households on both the upper and lower portions of Central Ave, and that all conversations were positive, inclusive. The residents were asked if they would like to participate as well, either being an extra peeking out of their windows, maybe coming out of their homes, and to see what's going on, loading their cars. They have not, but they intend to send out letters to all of the residents. They want to have a full community engagement as far as that. They're only looking for 3 or 4 residents. Speaking to access and egress, they have actually, their language was, we never consider a situation where homeowners and business owners as well don't have full and complete access to the respected properties or locations that they wish to visit.
Mhm.
So taking it at face value, access should not be a concern. Though keeping it in mind, it is a 5-hour block of time that you're considering. But the results out of other local shoots that they have performed have seemed to be relatively positive. I mean, if you haven't heard any complaints, it's typically a good indicator.
Councilmember Risberger?
Yeah, Carrie, thanks for everything you're doing with us, being the go-between and getting all the information for us. I've gone back and forth about this because I know with other movie shoots, they don't actually utilize the local police and fire departments. They come up with their own cars and such. But I could get on board with this as long as we're not using overtime. Chief Pigeon, I think that was a great idea. That hadn't been brought up before, but I think if there's some way they could utilize either of the two chiefs or the lieutenant, so we're not using overtime, that's fine. Unless there's somebody that's got the free time while they're on duty. And the only other thing I would be concerned about is we're in a pandemic, and they're going to be shooting a disaster movie. So I think we need to make sure that the public is well aware of, if we decide to do this, that the public is well aware of what's happening, so we don't have a scenario where people that aren't aware of what's going on start to freak out, thinking that something else has happened in 2020. So those are my only concerns.
Carrie?
Go ahead, John.
Carrie, do you know how many people will be working with the filming company during this?
I do not, I'm sorry.
Either Greg or Carrie. I think Katie was handling this. Do we have she's not here tonight. Do we have an actual motion prepared for the approval of this?
We do.
Could you read it, Carrie?
Yeah, absolutely. The motion would be motion that the Common Council approves the closure applications for Main Street and Central Avenue as presented by Corey Rowe and Lori Bailey. The Common Council further authorizes the use of personnel and city equipment subject to review by the city attorney and in compliance with any and all collective bargaining unit agreements.
Why don't we see if we've had time for questions. I see it, Katie, I'll get to you. Why don't we've had time for questions. I think why don't we now see if we have someone who wants to move on that motion in a second, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Do I have anybody who wants to move on that motion? Katie, are you moving on the motion? Okay. Do I have a second? Scott, are you seconding it? Okay. So now discussion. Councilmember Lepari-Shu, please.
Thank you. So I totally support this. I think it's a great idea to bring this industry. I think we are lucky to have talent in our area, homebound, that wants to highlight our community and utilize us. I think, and I also totally understand being, a smaller production company and trying to, use your resources as wisely as you can, and really take wherever you can get in terms of being able to make the best product that you can. So I understand them wanting to use the city equipment and personnel. It makes me nervous, just quite frankly. So I think that my big thing that I want to hear in like bold print with a period at the end is that if something were to happen to the equipment or the personnel, that their insurance policy would cover that loss or any, medical treatment that would need to happen. And then I think the other piece too is, again, just the financial implication of effectively, subsidizing the cost of this for the production company. So, I think our hometown can absolutely support, a local person trying to do something cool. I just want to make sure that we're doing it in the most sensible way possible. So just with regard to the equipment piece and the personnel piece, we are talking about paying someone to drive their vehicle, more than one vehicle, and also their insurance policy is going to cover the vehicle. Those are my questions.
I believe Chief Pigeon said that we would not be paying somebody time to drive it. I don't recall what Chief Brenner said.
Yeah, I would do something along those same lines. Probably myself or the lieutenant. Of course, I'm hoping that's my big break. So.
And so I'm sorry, I'm such a newbie, but so that's the way that your pay structure works, right? Like you're on a salary or something, and so you wouldn't it would be included in your time.
Yeah, that's correct. It would just be straight time. Wouldn't be any overtime or anything like that. I'm salaried.
Okay.
Yeah, they might get you confused with Yul Brenner there, Chief.
The next Yul Brenner.
Any further discussion?
Just wanting, again, clarification about people on Central Avenue, my side and Katie's side of the street. Border between the wards goes right down the center of the street. But should anyone participate in this, will they be signing waivers for any injury that might occur to them, or what would be done about that? It's that.
I think David Merzig was looking to respond to you.
Okay, great.
No one can be filmed. It's against the law. It's against the civil rights law for any person to be filmed without their full knowledge and consent for profitable purposes. So unless these people were crazy or stupid, they would make sure that anyone who appeared in the film at all would have complete waivers, complete consent to participate. They would, and they would probably be notarized by 5 different people.
And any injuries that might occur during that participation?
That would depend on the waivers that the people chose to sign.
But that would be the responsibility of the production company. That wouldn't fall to the city.
Correct. Whenever anyone participates in any activity in the city at any time, they're required to sign a waiver of liability for the city. Every sports person who participates in a city park, anytime there's any activity of any kind, anytime a volunteer comes and picks up garbage in the city of Oneonta, there's an adult waiver that has to be signed before we will let them participate at all in any activity in the city. And film companies are exactly the same.
Len, did I see you have a hand up? Go ahead, please.
So just a few things, Gary. First off, I was just up in the Lake George area last weekend, and I was talking to an individual that's in charge of or thereof for marketing and tourism in the Lake George area. And they're actually out recruiting small film companies like this to come in, because the way I understand this is that the large film companies cannot be open because of COVID. So their Netflix and Amazon are buying any of these films. So I think it's great that we have local talent trying to compete with the big boys. Secondly, I'm in support of this. We have local talent that is coming forward. I appreciate Chief Pigeon and Chief Brenner for stepping up. It kind of reminds me, Doug, to your point about making your break. Do you remember I guess it's got to be close to 30 years ago when we did the film up on SUNY Oneonta, and they made us respond up with the ambulance and the engine and the police car. That was a long time ago. So I didn't get my big break. Maybe it was because I had hair back then. I don't know. And then thirdly, Gary, I just want full transparency. I believe Lori Bailey is a second or third or fourth cousin. So just, I didn't want any conflict of interest there when I'm voting.
At some point, we don't have a process that's been defined about what we'd want to do about this. We're just kind of now saying, okay, let's do it. Remember, my neighbors know the people, went to high school with them, and feel comfortable with it. But I think that as we move along, if this continues, we might want to have a process with a system that gives us some guidance about what we would require in the way of this, if this should pan out. Yeah.
And
Len, or is that Bruce? Oh, Bruce Willis.
Yes, Bruce Willis. So Gary and John, I believe the individual that you want to talk to is Greg Klein. He's a reporter for the Daily Star, but he's also, I know for the last 2-3 years, he's been petitioning at Otsego County Board of Representatives to try and start a film company or something. So to your point, I believe Greg would be the individual that you would want to locally contact to see if you can start putting some parameters and standards into place for community filming.
And Greg is already requested to be on the agenda for next week's planning committee meeting to discuss that very issue. And Greg is probably listening in right now in his Daily Star role, clapping. Okay, everybody okay with moving forward with calling the vote? All righty. Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger.
Aye.
Councilmember Leparish.
Aye.
Councilmember Carson.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Aye.
Councilmember Rafter.
Aye.
Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Thank you. The next item was the waiver for the residency requirement for a firefighter, temporary waiver. I'm going to let Chief Pigeon to present what that's all about. Chief, are you okay with that?
Yes, I can do that, Mayor. Thank you. One of our most recent hires, full-time firefighter, who's just graduated the academy at the end of July, he lives out of the area. His 6-month residency requirements comes up August 21st. And a few weeks back, he had submitted through his officer a request for a 60-day extension of that due to COVID. They had a 2-month delay in the completion of the academy. The assistant chief has spoken to him, along with one of his captains has spoken to him, and he is actively seeking residency. The residency requirements are the city and or town of Oneonta and or 5 miles as a crow flies from the city flagpole out here in front of the public safety building. I believe this was discussed or had been discussed and brought up at the finance HR meeting last week. And I believe they moved it forward for that. And there's quite a lengthy discussion on it. My recommendation or my support would be for a 30-day extension to him to kind of meet him in the middle, give him a little bit more time. And my reasoning for that is that we need him here for callback purposes on his opposite callback days. He lives approximately an hour away now. And has not been available to come back in an emergency situation for callback on his opposite crew. He wouldn't have been because he was at the academy for a certain period of time, so that we do take that into consideration. But I'd like to, work with him to be able to do that. And give him a 30-day extension would be my recommendation. But the request was for a 60-day residency waiver.
Okay, any questions for the chief? Councilmember Lepari Shu.
So this is just with regard to one individual. We're not setting a policy going forward.
That's my understanding. That's correct.
That's correct. We're waiving the policy for this individual.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Do I have any other questions for the chief?
Chief,
Yes.
what would happen if at the end of the 30-day period, he still was not able to move into the area?
I believe if this is the council's decision after that 30 days, he could certainly reapply for an additional 30 days, I believe. And or if we're putting him hard notice that he's got 30 days, or you don't take action on it, he would not be following the rules. I would have to possibility that he could be terminated, I believe. I'd have to defer to Katie and personnel for that. But
I can answer that
Councilmember
for you.
Risberger? Oh, wait, hold a minute. David Merzick was going to.
Yeah, it would, we have, the residency requirement is a hard requirement unless it was extended, either extended, if it wasn't extended, his employment would be terminated.
Councilmember Risberger, who is hiding in the dark, we can't see his facial expressions. It's
Light
probably
a candle.
intentional.
Curse the dark.
I was just
We
going to
don't-
say that if the 30 days goes by and he still hasn't found residency here, that we just, if he wants to reapply, he reapplies, and we listen to what his argument is and what his reasons for it are. I mean, it's his uncertain times and unprecedented times. So I'm not going to worry about it till I need to worry about it.
Is there any other questions? Councilmember Carson, also hiding in the dark. We can't see he's rolling his eyes, I think. Maybe not.
Well, this is the new Bruce Willis look. So thank you, John. But Dave, to your point, if I understand this correctly, both Daves, actually, Dave Merzick. So if we say tonight 30 days for an extension for this waiver, on day 31 from this date forward, if he's not in, as Chief Pigeon described, the 5 Mile, Crow, the town, fire district, or the city of Oneonta, the employee will be terminated on day 31.
Yes.
So Dave Risberger, to your point, we're not going to hear back from this individual again. So on day 31, we say goodbye to someone that we've invested, I believe it's 11-week academy. I believe this individual, the way it was explained, was ready to hit the streets. That's the part that I was concerned about. I know that the department is struggling to get qualified personnel in here. So for the 29 days or 30 days that he's asking, I think it's a risk.
So certainly the chief could come back asking for another 30-day extension before he's terminated if he desires to do so.
his actual date is he was hired on February 21st, so it would be August 21st, and then it would be a 30 days from there. So it is a couple extra days there. So, but yes, and I'd certainly, if he for some reason could not find something in this time, I would support that. But I would, I want to get him moving on it and have him here as quickly as possible so that we can utilize him for callback.
I understand that, Chief. I just know that with talking to real estate agents, that our real estate is being bought up by the hours. That's the way they're describing to me. So it might be very difficult for him to find, or she find, housing.
Okay, do we have a motion? Who has the motion?
I have
Katie? Katie, I'm sorry, Carrie. Do you want to read it, Carrie?
Motion that the Common Council grants a temporary residency waiver pursuant to City of Oneonta Code Section 45, Sub 5 for employee number 024238 of the Oneonta Fire Department. This residency is not to exceed blank calendar days and is limited solely to the address or addresses provided to the Personnel Department at the time of the request.
I believe the chief was requesting 31 days, so the motion will be for 31 calendar days. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Risberger, do I have a second? Councilmember Harrington? Okay, further discussion on it. Okay, if there's none, we'll call the vote.
Mayor, it's Chief Pigeon. So it would be 31 days from his final anniversary date or his final resident, which would be August 21st. So 31 days from then.
31 days from August, what was that again, Chief? August what?
I believe the last conversation I had with the personnel director was August 21st.
Okay. So it's 31 days from August 21st. Okay. If there's no further discussion, I'll call the vote. Councilmember Murphy.
Aye.
Councilmember Davies.
Aye.
Councilmember Risberger.
Aye.
Councilmember Lepari Shu. Did we lose her? Okay. Councilmember Carson.
Aye.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter. Councilmember Drenick.
Aye.
No,
You, Councilmember Rafter voted no, correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
That's not to not permit the 30 days, but to be flexible about the extension and actually be informed by the chief. If I voted yes on this, I'd expect the chief several days before this to give us an update. And then we can talk about termination of this person or extending another 30. As it is, it seems like it's a wink and a nod, perhaps.
Okay, it's a no vote.
It's
Councilmember
a no
Drenick.
vote.
Aye.
Mayor, Councilmember Lepari Shu is here.
I can see that. Yes, I'm sorry I missed you on it. Are you up to speed on where we're at?
Yes, and that's okay. My internet just gave up. Just figured
Okay.
it was done. So,
Are you
but luckily I'm
prepared?
back.
Are you prepared to vote?
Yeah, I would vote yes.
Okay, so then the motion passes. Okay, thank you. Now I'm going to go to the motion that was on the consent agenda. This is motion 19, motion that the council accepts the proposal from the New York State Business Development Corporation to release the city's full mortgage position on the property located at 219-225 Main Street. This would be in exchange for $5,000 to come from the proceeds of the New York Business Development Corporation's ultimate sale of the property. It further authorizes the acceptance of any amount up to the extent of its cash outlay, which was $50,000, in case of any overage from said sale. Do I have a motion to approve? Councilmember Drenick. Do I have a second? Councilmember Davies. I'll open discussion, but first let me just turn it over to David Merzig. Provide any clarification on this, including what it means about the position of the mortgage, at the city's position of the mortgage, and how that impacts us.
Part of my problem is that I don't know what I need to explain and what I don't need to explain. As is always the case in any community development process, we come in behind the primary lender with any grant funds, and that's what the $350,000 that was originally put in as a grant came behind the primary lender. Then, in addition to that, we had a cash outlay, which was not a grant, but $50,000 of city money that was put in as final dollars to get Bombers open. That is the those are the real dollars that are at risk, and that amount of money is currently third in place. So, as shown on the proposal, the current primary lien is almost $1.2 million. Their thinking is if they have to go through the entire foreclosure process because of our liens, it's going to take them, again, I don't know if you're aware of it, but all mortgage foreclosures have been stopped by the courts. So there haven't been any mortgage foreclosures within the last year, or ever since the COVID went into place. I believe it was either February or March. But they're approximately a year behind. Some commercial foreclosures are being allowed. But the bottom line is that if they would have to go through the entire foreclosure proceeding, it could reasonably take them a year and a half, most probably 2 years, before they would have clear title. And under the circumstances, if the property was sold based on their appraisal and based apparently on our assessor's valuation of the property, we would be cut out from any recovery at any rate. So we'd be a couple of years down the line. We're so far down on the priorities list that when it was sold to the highest bidder, it would probably go again to the Business Development Corp, who would take title free and clear of our liens. So what this is doing is getting us something, but it's unlikely that we would be getting very much back. So you should understand that this is basically a write-off. Yeah, Dave.
Okay. I'll open up for
whatever,
discussion.
yeah.
I'll open up for discussion now, which includes questions. Councilmember Risberger.
Okay, so if we do this, they don't go through the foreclosure process, and so what does that look like exactly?
Well, they may still go through the foreclosure process because they have to. Again, I don't know what discussions there have been between the debtors and the priority and the prime mortgage holder. Both the guarantors have filed for bankruptcy, so it's unlikely that they will have any assets. There may be small amounts of assets that could be recoverable by the primary creditor for the $1.2 million. What very often will happen in circumstances like this is that what they'll do is sign over what's called a deed in lieu of foreclosure, where because they're in bankruptcy already, what they will and they won't gain anything by going through the foreclosure proceeding, and they simply deed over any interest that they still have in the property directly over to the primary creditor, to the primary lender. So if that's what they do, and we are out of the picture because we have waived our rights to them in exchange for the $5,000, then that will free it up in a relatively short period of time, maybe 3 or 4 months, instead of 2 years, which would then allow them to market it in order to recoup their money.
So could we be essentially, if we do this tonight, we could essentially be saving them thousands of dollars in legal fees and in addition to speeding up the process? I guess I'm wondering is $5,000 really, should we be settling for $5,000, or should we say, well, make it a little bit more worth our while?
Well, I think they're thinking, and I think it's a legitimate position, is that if we're the dog in the manger, where we gaining nothing except sitting still and putting them, through the ringer for 2 years, then we will also be losing, because again, during the period of bankruptcy, the likelihood of anybody moving in there is literally zero. A trustee might be able to get somebody in there, but we'd be cutting off our nose to spite our face. Frankly, I mean, we could certainly ask for more, but again, I would think that the goal would be to facilitate this as quickly as possible. I mean, there's a turnkey restaurant in there right now, and if it waits 2 years, it might not be in as good shape as it is now. So I think it's a wasting asset. At least, again, that's a decision for the council to make, and we can certainly go back to them. But as a practical matter, I don't think that would be necessarily to our advantage.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Lepari Shu?
Yeah, I mean, so I just think that since this is such an issue that's in the public awareness, as much information on how all of this went down as possible is in the best interest of the city. I know that many of us on the council were not involved in the decision to give this business not only the grant, but the real dollars, as David put it. We're looking at taking a $45,000 loss on this project, which does not sit well with the general populace, and for good reason. I just think that, when we're looking at, kind of just to echo Dave's point, in their proposal, they are mentioning that they are going to be short $600,000, but they are looking to recoup approximately half of their investment, while we're looking at about 10%. So I don't know, maybe it is nickel and dime, maybe it is to spite our face, but I think that it's just an interesting
Okay, it looks like Katie has froze up. So we can go back to her when our internet releases. Councilmember Harrington?
Yeah, I kind of brought this up at the finance meeting, and I'm just going to say it again. I think, in looking at this, I don't see where it would hurt to go back and ask for more money. I understand what Dave Merzig's saying, but sometimes I think we settle too quick to try to settle things, and I just think I don't see a rush to get this completed tonight. I think we could reach back out and try to get a little bit more. That's just my opinion for right now.
Councilmember Drenick?
So $1,000 here and $1,000 there. We really need to have that building back on the market and hopefully occupied. It's a turnkey restaurant, and there's a huge hole on Main Street. Yeah, I mean, $1,000 here, $1,000 there. I agree, but I don't believe that the pursuit of a couple of $1,000s should slow this process down. We need to revitalize our Main Street, and the best we can do that is we can move on a piece of property to put it back in play. We need to do that, and this is unfortunate the way this all transpired. Certainly, it's disappointing for everybody. There's a turnkey restaurant in there. We are Len Carson, I believe, mentioned the fact that the real estate agents are doing wonderfully right now. There are a lot of people moving up here. If we get to the other side of this virus, there is going to be a desire on people's part to serve some of these people. There's a turnkey restaurant. We need to make that available to people as soon as we possibly can. And so I would absolutely vote to move this along, and we lose 1,000 or not in the process. In the scheme of things, what is it worth to us to have something stay closed? And as I said, it's too big a hole on Main Street.
Do I have anybody else besides Councilmember Harrington? Give somebody else a chance who hasn't spoken yet. Councilmember Rafter?
You've mentioned that this is a turnkey restaurant. Will they be able to change that by selling off their equipment and seating and that sort of thing?
It would not be to their benefit, because if the lender takes ownership, it's to their benefit to sell it as a turnkey restaurant and make it more saleable. So, conversation that I've had with them is they feel that they have the makings of an agreement with the owner, the current owner is in bankruptcy. If the council gives up on our position, they are going to move forward with a deed exchange, and then they want to sell it as inexpensively as possible so that they can move on from this and get what they can out of it and not prolong it.
So that means that they will not do that?
That's my understanding, that they would have that's not their intent, or do I think they have any there's any motivation for them to do that? Councilmember Harrington, you had your hand up.
So I mean, there's still no guarantee that they're not going to strip it and sell it. That's, but to Mark Drenick's point, and from what I understand, what Dave was saying, even if we sign off, there's no guarantee that this is going to speed up the process for the building to be turned over. Is that correct, Dave?
Well, we can guarantee that it won't. If we simply say, no, you're going to have to go through the mortgage process or the mortgage foreclosure process, then again, we can stop it from happening. We can't guarantee that we'll speed it up. But again, there's the motivation from the debtors, from the creditor's point of view, is to get as much as they can, as soon as they can, and turn it over. So, and again, as the mayor was saying, it makes the most sense for them. The greatest value is not in a deep fryer per se, but having a turnkey restaurant where somebody can come in and start using it as a restaurant ASAP. But again, that's your I can't guarantee them that they're going to do anything. That's what would be in their best interest.
Councilmember Carson.
Thank you, Mayor. So, a few things I want to bring up. The total debt on this particular project is just south of 1.2. The creditor, Pursuit or NYBDC, is asking us to give up our second position, and as Dave Merzick just said, we even have a third position on the 50,000 for $5,000. To Councilmember Drenick's point, you're absolutely right. There's a beautiful kitchen inside ready to go. I've already heard of a couple of local people that are interested in this building. And so it would be in our best interest to hold our position so that the negotiating can happen between locals with this entity. And before that, we need to settle our HRC process. HRC hasn't come down, or HRS. Am I saying that right, Gary? Is it HRC or
HCR?
HCR, sorry. They haven't come down and signed off yet. So 2 projects, I need them to sign off on Nick's Diner, and they need to come down and sign off on Bomber's Burritos. So it would be nice if HCR would sign off so that the city would actually know that we're going to be truly free and clear of the, I believe it's $400,000. So I would ask this council to stay fast and hold. There's no rush right now. As Dave Merzick pointed out, the foreclosure process is 1 to 2 years behind. We don't have the HCR signed off. And to Katie Lapari's shoes point, I agree wholeheartedly. Pursuit is trying to get to 50% of their loss, and they're only offering us 10%. So I would ask the council to table this, and let's see if we can't negotiate a better deal with maybe some locals and or with Pursuit.
I would just ask for one thing I didn't follow, Len, and maybe David can weigh in on this, is that you mentioned negotiations between locals. I'm not quite sure I follow how and if that could take place. David, do you have anything on that?
mean, the only way that they could negotiate with anybody is if our position has been freed up. I mean, I don't.
So
I mean,
I actually
right now,
reached out- yeah, David, I
Sorry.
actually reached out and talked to a couple of financial people about this, and I tried to stay as generic as I can. So, but they actually said it would do better for you if you just stood fast, hold your second position for negotiating purposes. It gives that individual coming in, sitting across from Pursuit, a little bit more leverage. And for us, I remember, and you correct me if I'm wrong, David, is that to get the 5,000, the way that Pursuit wrote it up is that they would potentially give us that 5,000 after they sold the property for whatever they got. And I believe it's appraised for 414,000. So they're lost no matter what on a project. And so I don't see the rush right now since the state agency hasn't come down and done their part on 2 projects that we have here in the city. I would just ask that we hold fast for a little while.
Is there anyone who hasn't spoken on this yet first? And then I'll go around a second time. Okay, Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to finish my statement. So I think Councilmember Carson just brought up a really good point. And so my whole thing is that, the public kind of views this as a disaster that the city was involved in. I think right now we're in damage control, right? How do we survive this? How do we come out well on the behalf of our taxpayers? And I think what I was getting at before when my internet cut out is that, we do also have stake in another local business, Nick's. And I just think that it's, important that we don't send the message that this is no big deal, that we'll just let it go. And I don't want to be petty about it, but I do think that we need to advocate on behalf of our position. So that's kind of my whole argument. Thanks.
Councilmember Risberger.
As one of only 2 council members here that were part of this original decision, I just want to point out that before this group came in and purchased this building to then put the restaurant in, that building sat empty for a very long time. The storefront was empty anyway. I don't know about the apartments upstairs. So it's rare that the city has forked over a small loan like this to a group to do a project. But I do know anytime that, whether it's grant money or money that we're putting out there to help a business, we do this. We how do I put this? The city has worked with different groups over the years, many different groups, to try to help them with their business startups, whether it's tax deferment or whatnot. And in each one of these cases, it's a chance we take. But more often than not, I think the positives outweigh the negatives, and it's a way to help business move forward in the community. So I still think the decision we made to help Bombers was a good decision at the time with the information that we had. That being said, I'm very disappointed with what happened with Bombers, and it seems like their business plan was flawed on many levels. But I think that whatever we can do to speed this process along, I wouldn't want this to go into a foreclosure where it takes years for them to offload the property. Again, I think it's a different owner than it was before. It's the owner before was willing to sit on the property. I think whatever we can do to move it forward to have somebody else purchase it would be a good thing. I understand, and I brought it up too, about the $5,000 being only 10% of what we put in. I also wouldn't hold fast to that. I think I would rather get this property offloaded and get it moving, especially since there's a lot of movement between downstate to upstate at this point. So I think even though I agree with what Len is saying and what Scott's saying, and I even said it before too, I questioned it, and Katie, I think I, for one, would be more willing to say, let's let this go, and hopefully get the property moving.
Lapari Shu.
Yeah, sorry, I just have one more thing to say, which is that, I think that Dave is right. There must have been some serious flaws in their business plan, and to take what is basically an existing successful franchise, renovate a beautiful building, and only be able to stay in business for 5 months. So my question is, if we let this go, and this is my big concern, because we're going to lose either way. If we let this go, like what did our oversight look like on this project? And what does our oversight look like? Because I agree with Dave that it's important that we are, pro-business and doing everything that we can. I, for one, was at Bombers as just my personal economy, like once a week. But I think that it's great, to encourage new faces and to do what we can as a city, especially when we think that there are things that are going to benefit our city, and that are going to be done well and that are going to succeed. What did we miss? Like what was that red flag? And so I guess, yeah, my question is, how do we keep this from happening again?
I'm not sure how we avoid having this happen again, but it also brings up the fact, and I'm thankful Councilmember Risberger, as chair of planning, is willing to continue talking about having our own economic developer. Tonight, also, another service organization voted on selling their property, going through the process. It's not up for sale yet, but they've recognized they can no longer hold on to it. So there's another large commercial property that's just going to come available. So we have several of those buildings right now in our downtown area. So I look at it as that this is an opportunity again that we need to, as a council, seriously talk about having our own economic developer and really get behind our local businesses and have someone that is results driven. And I look forward to having more conversations in our planning committee over that. But again, I can't stress enough to you guys that I think we're in a better position holding our second and third positions in negotiating. I'm not going to reveal that much. I can just tell you that I've had several conversations throughout this community, and there is interest in purchasing that building. And I would ask that our council just stand fast and table this issue for a couple of.
Councilmember Drenick.
Yeah, Councilmember Carson, can you provide any kind of expectation of how long you'd want to see this tabled for?
Well, Mark, I was actually sitting there when Dave Risberger was talking about how long ago it was. I think they actually started talking about this project. It's got to be 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When it was originally talked, this particular individual that did the project said that they were going to renovate the second and third floors, which still look like, I think it's earlier than World War II. Right. And all they did renovate was the first floor and the basement. So the expectation, I would say, a month to 2 months, which is relatively short if we look at the overall project that took 6 years to come to, or 5 years to come to fruition, and it only stayed in business for what, not even 6 months? Wasn't it like June or July that they opened up, and by December we were all questioning this?
So a couple of months.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Len on this. I too have been talking to people that have local interest in it, and I think if we can help our local interest first, I don't see why delaying it for a couple months to see if it really gets traction to go would be so bad. I don't see a rush to just settle for the first thing that comes at us. And I think sometimes we get ourselves in trouble because we're willing to settle for the first offer that's thrown at us and not try to push back a little bit and say, hey, that's, and then and to Katie's point, when we say, how can we try to avoid this again, if they realize that we're going to ask for stuff and we're going to be a little bit harder line than before, I think that can help us out too. So that's just my opinions. And I'm with Len. I think tabling it for just a little bit wouldn't hurt us one way or another.
I just want to ask David again, Merzick, for some clarification. David, is it possible, how could the city or how could somebody purchase that property from the existing owner while Pursuit has a large lien on that property of $1 million? I mean, what I hear Councilmember Carson talking about is if we hold on, a local person or somebody may come in and buy the property. I don't follow a way that can happen, but perhaps there is, David.
Oh, they would have to go through Pursuit.
Correct.
And if they went through Pursuit, and they would also need us. Again, there has to be a three-legged stool here. There has to be a buyer, there has to be Pursuit, and there has to be us. And if the argument would be is if we're the third leg of the stool and the deal can't go forward unless all three parties, the buyer, Pursuit, and us agree that we could squeeze some more money out of it, that would be the position.
Correct. And it also would look good for us to continue through HCR, is that we could have somebody either local or somewhat local buy this property, buy the building, look at renovating the second and third floors. And that would look good for us too, to have HCR involved in this. And I think that could continue through. So to David's point, that's correct. They would have to negotiate with Pursuit.
And with us.
And with us. And
because
we
again, we're the third piece of the puzzle.
Correct. We can't give up we can give up our position, but we would do stronger if we held fast and was able to negotiate.
So Len, are you moving to table this?
I guess at this point, I'm going to make an official motion to table this motion and look for a second on it.
Do I have a second on that? Okay, Councilmember Harrington seconds.
A motion to table is not a discussable motion. You just need to vote on it.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Councilmember Murphy, you're now voting yes or no on tabling the motion.
No.
Okay. Councilmember Davies.
Yes.
Councilmember Risberger.
No.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Yes.
Councilmember Carson.
Yes.
Councilmember Harrington.
Yes.
Councilmember Rafter.
Yes.
Councilmember Drenick.
No.
Okay, I have 5 yes votes so that the motion to table passes. With that, let me just go back to my agenda screen here. Does anybody want to bring up any additional business? Councilmember Carson.
Thank you, Mayor. I also just wanted to say thank you for sending out the email earlier this afternoon about the discussion on the city manager and the council and our work in doing that. I would also just like to bring up for council discussion about having the interim city manager. I think we talked about this a few months ago. I just want to be careful that we are not breaking the city charter, which Dave Merzig, as our legal representative, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the city charter is law. It's not a set of guidelines for us. We're supposed to be adhering to the city charter. And so I just want to make sure that we as a new council, that we're not becoming liable, that we can be sued for not at least having an interim city manager. And so Gary, if you don't mind, I would look to David Merzig to clarify that. I mean, are we susceptible to having a lawsuit at this point?
No. Simple answer is no.
Okay.
There's no provision in the charter that says that if we don't have a city manager within 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, that the city is acting in violation of its charter.
Okay.
So the answer is no. I mean, it's at some point, if the council passed a resolution stating that they never intended to hire a city manager and they were going to go forward on their own and screw the charter, then you might have a problem. But
right.
But at this point, we're not. There is no deadline per se.
Right. So I guess again, Gary, I just look to the council to kind of show me what's the negative of not moving forward with an interim city manager. I mean, again, I look at our local city school board and other cities or other school boards. When their superintendent leaves, the school board immediately goes and they get an interim city manager. And I just I want to throw that out there for discussion.
Well, Len, as I said in my email today, this isn't a simple discussion. It's very complex. There's many ramifications to it. There's many things that are unique to the time and place we're in now. And I think it's going to require a lengthy, in-depth discussion amongst the council members. That's why I said in my email today that I think with the budget season coming up, it'll certainly be something looked at because there's a line item currently for the city manager's salary. There's about a $200,000 expense there for 2021. Before we get to that, I think it's important that we meet as a group, that the council meets. We set aside a meeting just for this purpose to have an in-depth discussion about it. So I agree that we need to discuss it. We should in the next couple of weeks. But I think it's something we really need to set aside a sizable piece of time to be able to discuss in entirety.
I completely agree, Gary. I look forward to seeing us locking in a date in the next week or two that we can all get together and have a good open dialogue about either the interim city manager or how we're going to move forward with the city manager. So thank you.
Yeah, that was my intention in the email today. Anybody else? Councilmember Harrington?
Yes, I would just like to thank Greg Mattice for a quick response to an issue down on here in the 6th Ward. He just emailed me this tonight that he's going to be taking care of the problem on the corner of River and Gilbert, where some work was done and the lawn's a little bit high and the guy keeps scalping it, and he's going to go back and pick up some of the debris and stuff that was there. So I just want to thank Greg and thank his crew. As soon as they can get down there and get that done, it's appreciated. And I know that the residents going to be real happy when I let them know.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm not aware of any correspondence. So with that, thank you all.
Gary.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lapari Shu had her hand up.
I didn't see you there, but go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up the census again. There's a very small team of individuals who are working very hard to make sure that everybody in our community is counted. We are trending about 10% behind where we were in 2010 in terms of response rate. Only about 50% currently, and in 2010 at this time we had about 60%. The concerning piece of that is also that the deadline has been moved up to the last day of September from the last day of October, which was already moved up. So the timeline is tight. The last day to do it is September 30th. You can do it by phone, 844-330-2020 or 2020census.gov. It's very important. It's how we receive a lot of our federal funding. So if you know that you have elderly neighbors or college students count in our community, college students for neighbors, renters for neighbors, just if you're watching, please bring up the census. I helped my elderly neighbor. It took less than 5 minutes. It was great. So just the census. It's great. Let's do it. Thanks.
Thank you. With that, I believe there's no additional business. So